Well, another Georgia assistant coach is going to be headed elsewhere. Dell McGee being reported as the next head coach at Georgia State. Listen, I think this makes a lot of sense. I talked not that long ago in a video about when Sean Elliott left to go to be I think it's tight ends coach. He had been the offensive line coach at South Carolina for a while. Then he went to take on the Georgia State job, and then soon thereafter, of course, now in this offseason, he's decided to go back to Columbia to be a position coach again. Which I just have to say that is I'm not sure what's going on there. That sounds a little strange to me, but it's his it's his world. Um, Now it's going to be Dell McGee. That's the report going to Georgia State. When I was talking about Elliott leaving, I thought, man, this makes a lot of sense for Brian McClendon, who wound up going to the Tampa Bay Bucks, or Dell McGee. Dell McGee's been a head coach, was extremely successful at Carver. I think he was at Auburn for a little bit of time before going to Georgia Southern, at least interviewing for the Southern job. Dell McGee makes a lot of sense for this particular position. Why? Well, I mean, there he has been in this area for such a long time after being a player at Auburn, a very successful head coach in Columbus, being a very successful assistant coach in Athens. He has made it be known that he wants to be a a head coach one day. Well, that day has come, and I think that there's really nothing. I just it's been time now. It's time for Dell to get his look at you know what it's like to be a head coach. I'm rolling through some of these images of Dell through the years. These 16 images take me back. I'm just gonna tell you that right now. To that beginning of the Kirby time was something else. But Dell had Sonny Michelle, Nick Chubb, DeAndre Swift, Kendall Milton. It's just had really, really good players at his spot, and guys that some of these are going to be repeated images, by the way. This was the most recent image of Dell from that game in Miami. Look back. I mean, this is what Father Time does to us. Here's Dell in 16, and then here is Dell like 2 months ago when we were in Miami. Look at that gray Dell. Get it done, man. That's it's happening to all of us. It's terrible, but you know, he having dealt with him a little bit during the Isaiah Crowell. For folks who don't know, um, Isaiah Crowell was about as big a deal. I really don't. I don't know how else to explain it. Isaiah Crowell going to Georgia was a significant development during. This is him during one of the summer camps when we were allowed to go to camps at Georgia. Um, and when Isaiah picked Georgia over Alabama, essentially, Dell was his head coach, and that's where I think a lot of us dealt with him for the first time. That was a wild affair. Isaiah, you never could tell what was going on. Of course, Brian McClendon was recruiting him for Mark Richt's staff, and that was Isaiah was an extremely gifted player. Gabe Harris went to Auburn off that team too from Columbus, Carver, Columbus. Um, Dell Dell has always figured out how to have really good players around him, and that matters a lot. For Georgia now, they will have to replace their running backs coach. As of the time I've recorded this, there's no replacement at wide receiver coach either. But you're losing two guys now with very good connections in Atlanta and around the state in terms of recruiting. And there's not a lot of doubt that they have. I think Dell is the last person who is the last person that was on Georgia's original staff with Kirby Smart in 2016. I think everybody else, Jim Chaney, James Coley, Shane Beamer, Sam Pittman, and of course Dell, and then the entire defensive staff has cycled over. So I'm going off memory here, but I believe Dell is the last person to be connected to Kirby Kirby's original time there. So Kirby's talked a lot too about how much he's leaned on Dell through the years. And again, it's not the same as running Georgia State, but he was an extremely successful head coach in Columbus. Now that was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, about. But he's seen this now at the most successful program that's been there in his time at Georgia. That Georgia's been that since Dell's been there. It's been Georgia and Bama. So he knows what you got to do. There will be different challenges at Georgia State. The resources are not the same. The resources are not the same. The players will not be the same. But this makes a lot of sense for Georgia State, and it makes a lot of sense for Dell. So I think it's a good move on both parts. In terms of getting a running backs coach, I mean, you can go get a guy. That person's going to have to be able to recruit in a very big way. That person's going to have to be someone who, you're going to want to go steal someone's best recruiter. If you can pull that off, that's who you're going to want to get. If there's a Todd Hartley elsewhere, that's who you want to get for this position. Because running backs, you're not developing running backs the same way you're developing receivers and running backs. It's one position, right? Just like tight ends. You're not teaching a throwing motion and doing all these things. That person has got to go recruit. And not just recruit, they've got to sign high-level players, not just at running back, everywhere. Your running backs and tight ends coaches, they have got to matter for you in recruiting. They've got to help organize it. They've got to help execute it. They matter. Your offensive line coach, you can't ask that guy who's coaching 15 guys to be your lead recruiter. I mean, that's not something that – so that is where we're at here with this particular situation. Dell McGee's gone, and Georgia will have to replace it. They're going to have to replace it with somebody who's really good at recruiting and signing, not just recruiting. So with the new world that we're living in terms of the portal and NIL and all that, this person's going to have to be an expert on all of those matters. This person's whoever that person is, and Kirby probably already knows he's going to go get, which is fine. I certainly don't know who he's going to go get. But they're going to have to get this done. It matters. It's important. The difference between beating Ohio State, beating Alabama, and not beating them are players that these position coaches go and get. The difference between winning those games are the particular 3 players on a team that can make a difference like that. You're not going to get a lot of upsets like Alabama upsetting Georgia in Atlanta. Like, that's not common. So that's why it's called an upset. So you typically need to have the better players if you're wanting to beat the other team. That helps. Okay? I've been talking a lot with folks about Kentucky basketball lately. Kentucky basketball is not as good because they don't have the players they used to have. The coach is the same. They don't have Anthony Davis. They don't have, Karl Anthony Towns. They don't have, Fox. I mean, they had John Wall. I mean, they had guys. They don't have that. The separation between them and everybody else in the SEC is not what it used to be. The SEC is a lot better. Well, it's the same thing in football, right? I mean, maybe more acute in basketball because there's fewer players, but that's really important. And I think whoever Kirby decides to go get has got to be able to land 5-star, don't miss prospects. That's just all there is to it. It's important. It matters. And this position and tight end, both of them, they matter a lot. It's something that you've got to do. You've got to hone in on it and got to go get it. When you look at coming in here, you're going to have Branson Robinson, Andrew Paul, Roderick Robinson, Dwight Phillips Jr., all the guys, et cetera, that are coming in. You've got a lot to work with in this running backs room. There's no shortage of playmakers that are in here. I mean, Chauncey Bowens, Nate Frazier, Dwight Phillips Jr., they got guys. So they have a volume of guys now too. Whereas last year it got thin. I mean, you got Dylan Bell running the ball, being explosive, doing it, but you don't want, possibly your best playmaking wide receiver having to carry the burden for even 10 snaps a game at running back. So they've corrected the problem that they had, and now we're moving forward. But this is a premier position as an assistant coach in America, being able to coach running backs at Georgia. That's a big deal, and it's been held by Dell McGee for a long time. But now he's off to Georgia State. It's great for Dell, and we'll just see what Kirby does at running backs coach.